All right, and we are live. How is everybody doing today? This is tabmok99, and with me is Reyan Ali, the author of NBA Jam book. Reyan, welcome to the stream. Live. How is everybody doing today?
Thank you. It's very good to be here.
I think I might be hearing any kind of technical issues. Do you mind muting your YouTube window for me?
Yep, just muted that.
Thank you.
All right.
It's very good.
Make sure there's any kind of delay.
I think I might be hearing
All right, how's it now?
Do you mind muting your YouTube window for me? Give me a second. Let's the echo go through.
Yep, just muted that.
Thank you.
All right.
Very
Make sure there's any kind of delay.
I think I might be hearing
All right, how's it now? We're inside the Matrix.
Maybe it's on my end. Give me one sec. I don't know what this is. This is crazy. Okay, I think we got it. Sorry about that. Nope, I didn't get it. Dude, okay, what's going on? How are you doing?
Okay, I think we got it. Sorry about that. I'm doing all right. Do you need me to switch back over to YouTube over here? It's on mute. How are you doing?
You know what? Let me try something else. Okay.
Live TV, folks. Man, I'm excited. What a great day.
Live TV. Oh, man, you never know what's going to happen. Now there's a moth in here. Hey, okay, so before we get into this, I'm really excited to have you here. Thank you so much for being. I just have a quick announcement to make. Things have been a little bit slow around here. I actually broke my arm, as you can see. It is in a cast. That was not fun. The other day I was doing a live stream with Fatalcade as part of the Mortal Kombat Online live stream. We had a great tournament going on. The winner was Blackout. He went on to, this is part of the CGL thing, he went on to CGL's tournament where he has the chance to win a $10,000 prize. So shout out to Blackout for winning that tournament. That was awesome. I was on that stream for about 4 hours when I realized that my arm was just in too much pain and I had to get it checked out. And that's when it turned out it was broken. So that really sucked. But hey, I'm glad I got it taken care of. With that out of the way, I am so super stoked to have you. I read through NBA Jam, the book. I absolutely loved it. Welcome to the stream, man.
Thank you so much for having me, man. This is a huge moment for me. This is the day, of course, this is the day the book comes out. And I've been working on it since June 2015. So for this to be the moment, for this to be the time, for this to be the day that everything comes together, it just feels amazing. It feels different. Definitely feels different from when we've spoken before, either on Twitter or, when we did a stream sometime. I think it was last year. Yeah, it definitely feels different, but it feels great. And I'm so happy to be doing it with you, who is also one of the editors of my book.
Yes, I was so happy. I got sneak peek. I got early access to look through the book and edit it a little. And I gotta say, I love it. I especially appreciate the way it was organized. There's a chapter where you kind of build on other sports titles leading up to NBA Jam. There's a chapter where you talk about the perspective of arcade operators and what it's like for them when an NBA Jam machine made it into their arcades. You have one about the personal lives of the game developers and what they were going through in their careers before NBA Jam came along. So you really come at it from so many different angles. It's exciting to read it all the way around.
Yeah, thank you. It was a lot of work putting it all together, and I didn't quite know at first what I wanted this to be. So it's like, you start off with this big idea. What do you want an NBA Jam book to be? Do you want it to be, something that's just focused on one game? Do you want it to be something that's focused on the people that made the game? Do you want a mixture of both? Do you want it to be a certain tone, more lighthearted, more serious? So it was a lot of going back and forth on okay, what stuff really needs to be in there? What do people need to know? And in the end, I wanted to do as much as I could. Let's get the secret character stuff in there so we can get, interviews with DJ Jazzy Jeff or George Clinton there. Let's talk about the player's perspective so we can get Shaq in there and get Glenn Rice in there. Let's talk about Mark Turmell, who's this amazing cult figure that I hope has even more of a cult hero status after all this. I mean, what a crazy story. Mark Turmell's life alone would make an amazing book.
Yeah, for sure. And so many of those interviews you did with so many people, not just in the gaming industry, but also major basketball players, pro basketball players. Like last time we got together, we got to hear an interview with Shaquille O'Neal that you gave us, and thank you for that. Speaking of Shaq, let me switch over to this for a minute. I just saw this the other day. Shaq donates a year's rent to make sure that a paralyzed 12-year-old girl gets an accessible home. I just thought that was an incredible thing that Shaq did for charity. So kudos to him for stepping up. Not a whole lot of people would do something like that. I just thought that was really heartwarming to see that happen.
Absolutely. He's a very good dude. I mean, now granted, my interaction with him was only like 20 minutes long, and I think he was backing out of his driveway when I talked to him.
Oh man.
But he was struck me as anything but humble. So I'm not surprised they did something so kind. What a great thing to do. I saw that story too, and I was like, man, Shaq's the best. Like, even all these years later, there's new reasons to love Shaq all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially the Shaq Fu, which I had a chance to drink before when they sold it at the CVS. Good stuff. So let me talk to you about the interview. Let me ask you about the interview process. I know you said you had a chance to talk to Shaq on the phone. How many of these developers did you meet face to face? I know for sure you met Tim Kitzrow. I was with you when I actually got this shirt from him. That was the time of my life. So how many of these other guys have you gotten a chance to meet face to face?
Zero. None.
No, come on, Tim. You met Tim Kitzrow.
Not kidding you. Tim Kitzrow, besides the one you alluded to, I've not met a single soul face to face, which is crazy about this whole process. I've gotten to know them through, interacting over the phone, over text messages, over emails, things like that. But yeah, face to face, Tim Kitzrow was the only one, and that was after I'd pretty much had the most of the book written. And at that point, I was just going through the rewrite phase and starting to really do the polishing on what would eventually happen. I mean, what was that? When was JamCon? Was that March or April? I think it was sometime in April, maybe, right?
April sounds right. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then, I mean, that was like long after I was done with like the lion's share of the work. So yeah, it feels weird, but like I have not met these guys in real life. I've talked to Mark Jamel on the phone 10 times. Like, we've done 10 substantial interviews, which is probably more than you might even do with somebody in real life, like when you talk to him for a project. And it was totally worth it to get to know him and to talk to him so often. But no, besides Tim, zero, which is crazy. Yeah, there's a book out, and like I haven't met these guys, but I'm confident in the material.
Yeah, well, as you should be. I mean, I can tell that it's well researched. I see that you did a lot of, you looked up into the old magazine articles, you looked at books, your references section, the bibliography, it's all there. I wanted to share this with you. The other day, John Tobias posted a response to a magazine article that had an interview with him and Ed back in the 90s. And he replied back to that tweet saying, "Ha, that's a bogus interview. BS quotes that we never gave." What do you think about that? What do you think about the fact that you could look in some of these old magazines from the 90s and there's a chance that something could be completely made up?
That's a little disappointing. It's very pro wrestling to me. It's like in pro wrestling magazines, I definitely knew like they are not talking to Bret the Hitman Hart every time they publish a Bret the Hitman Hart interview. Yeah, it was a little surprising, but at the same time though, there's this one I found on a post on Twitter one of these days, a Boys to Men interview. So this is a member of Boys to Men did an interview with Sega Visions magazine, and he was basically just plugging some new Formula One game that Sega had out at the time, and he was like, "I love playing Formula One racing or whatever this game is." Like, and he just talked about it in such depth that it was clearly some kind of marketing pitch, which indicated to me that it was not some guy from Boys to Men. So I'm not totally surprised that they do that, but the fact that you'd run something like that it's still pretty peculiar, and the fact that it happened with Mortal Kombat, I'm surprised that I wonder if Boone and Tobias ever called that out back in the 90s, like, hey, that's not actually us. Or if this was like the first time of him, like he's seen something like this. I'm sure it's happened before.
They used to be very stiff-lipped. It always used to be no comment. No comment.
All right.
Most of those magazines, I want to believe, are legit, like GamePro, EGM, Nintendo Power, Game Players. I want to put my faith in those. Especially when you look at like the MK3 collector's book, and it's just so in-depth and all the information checks out, and it seems like there's no way they could make that stuff up. It has to be for real them. I don't know, but you know what? There's an example that we know for sure someone did fake it, and that is disappointing, like you said.
Yeah.
Does that
I know they did it in Nintendo Power too. Like in Nintendo Power, there's some of those celebrity interviews. Like I posted this DJ Jazz Jeff Will Smith one where Will Smith just loves Legend of Zelda, and he just goes on and on about it. And it was either that one or one of the other ones that I posted where somebody was like, that doesn't really sound like the actual person talking, that more sounds like a marketing person who's like, write the Will Smith DJ Jazz Jeff interview. We need it stat. Like, we need it for Nintendo Power right now.
They don't always capture their voice too well.
Yes. Yeah. What a weird gig, like making up fake interviews. But apparently that's still a thing. I've seen that with celebrities nowadays. Occasionally they have to come out and be like, I did not get this interview. This was not a real thing.
Oh man, I can't believe anybody who would still have the guts to try something like that in this day and age, where call out culture is a big thing. You do something wrong like that, people will call you out, and rightly so. You shouldn't fake something like that in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, if you're going to get caught, it's just going to make you look worse or make your publication look worse. So by doing that, you just open the door to some bad kind of thing happening. I don't know why you'd really do that. I mean, is the value of that interview really enough, or that fake interview really enough? But I guess there's some people out there that it's like, okay, yeah, it is worth it. Let's roll the dice. Let's, print a fake John Tobias interview. Let's print a fake Boyz II Men interview. And the fact that people are out there still doing that, got to hustle to make those dollars. I'm guessing there's some clickbait sites that definitely do that. Like, I don't know any offhand, but just like knowing that like that lineage, I'm sure there's some clickbait sites out there that are just making stuff up.
Yeah, it's just a numbers game. There's got to be. But that's why I like what you did with your book, because you actually shared the Shaquille O'Neal interview with us, and it was like, okay, you're for real. You really did get that interview. You went and pounded the pavement and made it happen.
I really did. I pounded the digital pavement, and he called me up when I was at work one day. It was, It's amazing that he did. So that was something that was cool. Like, I mean, I'm a no name. And he was just like, okay, yeah. Like, he must have said yes to his agent at some point. And then lo and behold, he's calling me up from somewhere in Florida, pulling out of a driveway while I'm in a little huddle room at work in Columbus, Ohio. Very strange.
All right, so let me ask you about this. I want you to talk to us a little bit about your book's publisher, Boss Fight Books, and I just pulled up an image of them for the stream right now. And we see some of the other titles that they've got, like Shovel Knight, Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, Katamari. I know that you told me about some other ones in the past. So tell me about this. Who is Boss Fight Books? What is their deal exactly? And how did you get connected with them?
Yeah, Boss Fight Books, they're based out of Los Angeles, California. They're an indie publisher, so they do only video game related books. The idea is that they do one subject per book. So they'll do, one book about Galaga, one book about Super Mario Brothers 2, one book about, I think it was Final Fantasy, I think it was 5. They'll do different subjects for each book. And they're a super cool idea. And I found them back in 2015, and actually I probably found them in 2014 before I pitched them. And I was like, this is super cool. It would be awesome to do something like this someday, not knowing what the future held for me. So it's really cool that happened. At first I was just like, oh, this is a cool project. I want to read it. I'm their 21st book. I'm their first book about a sports game, their second book about an arcade game. I guess Galaga was published by Midway back in the day, right? Like the original Midway?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was about to say this was the first Midway book, but I guess it wasn't. I guess Galaga beat me. But yeah, no, this is like, it's definitely my style of book that I've written, which is more like I'd say a novelistic style in terms of, turning these developers into characters, making sure that I'm not a character itself in the book, really trying to flesh out their world and who they are, what they did. I really want you to go inside their environment. That's something that I think is a new frontier for Boss Fight Books. They're just learning about. So yeah, they're a great publisher though. BossFightBooks.com. Check them out. They've got tons of good stuff. And recommend so many of them. I mean, the Galaga one is fantastic. It's very different. It's split up into smaller sections. The idea, I think, that is based on stages in Galaga or levels in Galaga. And it's pretty cool. It's a really great project, and they're good people to work for, good people to work with. And I'm super excited that I was able to get to the finish line with them. I know that they've got so many books in the hopper, so it's cool to finally be part of the series officially.
How many years were you working on this book? How many years have you been working on NBA Jam? Because I think your Shaq interview was back in 2016.
Oh, yeah. My Shaq interview was a long time ago. The world was in a different place back when I talked to Shaq. Man, June 2015 is when I pitched Boss Fight Books. And I think it was either May or June that I pitched them. And then it was amazing. They said, we'll get back to you in 2 months. And then I heard from them in 3 weeks. And they're like, we'll get back to you in a week. And then they got back to me a few days after that. So it was either really good news or it was really bad news. Thankfully, it was really good news. And then I remember that call that I had with Gabe, the publisher. He was like, at the end of the call, he's like, you ready? I was like, yeah. He's like, let's make a book. I was like, man, this is so cool. We're going to make a book. It's going to be a year, 2 years. Oh, I'll be done. It'll be fine. This is going to be great. And then lo and behold, one thing leads to another. You get one interview and you're like, man, it's not good enough to do 2 interviews. I want to do a 3rd interview and the 4th and then a 5th and a 15th and then a 20th. And then you get all the way up.
I think you did 60 altogether, right?
68. Yeah.
Oh,
Oh,
wow.
Lord, 68. Yeah.
One
Probably
number away from that magic number.
I know. I thought about that. I was like, I don't want to be the guy who did 69 interviews. Like when they have to run this wherever and I talk about it, I'm like, I'm gonna keep it at 68. So it's 68's the number as opposed to 69. But yeah. That said though, when I hit 69 followers, which will hopefully be soon, I'll definitely have to post about that.
Oh yeah, for sure. That's worth a celebration. I don't know
Of course,
what you do to
absolutely.
celebrate, but I'm sure you'll figure something out. Hey, let me ask
Oh
you
yeah.
this. Let me ask you this. There's a lot of confusion going on because there's so many mergers and acquisitions, especially in the 80s and 90s with Midway. We've got WMS Industries, we've got Williams, Bally, Midway. Can you kind of explain what all these different companies were? What did they specialize in? And how did they all come together to form eventually Williams, Bally, Midway?
Yeah, so each of them has roots going back to different places. In the case of Williams, I forget what the specific date is. It's within the book. It's either, I think it was early 50s maybe, that Williams was formed. And the Williams headquarters was where all the famous games, the games that we love, were made. You know, Mortal Kombat 2, NBA Jam, Smash TV, Revolution X, Terminator 2, a lot of the big ones. Things that were pre-995 for sure were all made over there. Mortal Kombat 3. Actually, that was 95. So I think it was maybe pre-97. I think NFL Blitz was right about when they changed offices to across the street. Still use the facility, but not in the same way. So that was Williams. Williams was the real heart of the business. I mean, the guys who worked over there, they would call it Williams. If you asked Mark Turmel or Ed Boon, who do you work for? They would probably say Williams. And at some point, I'm sure they graduated over to Midway, but they were Williams guys through and through. So they started. So that was the Williams side, and then the Midway side was a separate company that was competing with them. And Midway had really deep roots in the pinball business. I think it was the pinball business. Definitely did some novelty games, and then they ended up releasing the very first arcade basketball game, which is crazy to me that we've got Midway releasing not only NBA Jam, the iconic arcade basketball game, but the very first arcade basketball game, which was just a glorified Pong knockoff. That was Midway. I mean, that was a very different Midway from the one that ended up being the NBA Jam one, but it was Midway nonetheless. So there was Midway, there was Williams, and then there was Bally, which I think was absorbed by Midway. No. They ended up absorbing Midway. I get the chronology right in the book. It's been a minute since I've gone through this detail. It was so weird to me. It was like there are all these different companies, and of course, when I talk to people about it, they've known them for years, so they're going to just implicitly say, "Oh yeah, Williams this, Midway that," and I'm like, I don't know what this is. I had to ask multiple people, okay, who bought who, what went where, what was the thing, but ultimately there was a big merger, and this would have been the late '80s, and Midway goes out of business, which is crazy. That Midway went out of business twice in some ways. Midway went out of business back in the late 80s when, the original Midway that released things like Pac-Man, things like Gorf, they ended up, I guess, just burning through a whole lot of money. Very familiar story. And then Williams acquired them. And I've got a story that I love in the book that Eugene Jarvis told me, the co-creator of Defender and Robotron told me, was that, so the Williams guys, they have to get used to the Midway guys coming in. And as part of that, there's only a couple of them, but as part of that, they were going to keep the name Midway. And the Williams guys were like, we just beat these guys. Why are we keeping their name? We should be only Midway from now on.
I love that quote in the book. If I recall, it's something like, why are we flying the flag of the loser? That was so funny. And then I think Nick Castro said something like, hey, we paid millions of dollars, so we're going to use their name, damn it.
Absolutely.
So that was one of my favorite stories of the book.
It was such a great story. I mean, Lou Nicastro himself, he just only appears a couple of times, but God, I love the stories. I think actually, can I drop the full quote as far as I remember it?
Yeah.
I think it was I paid $7 million. I think it was like I paid $7 fucking million for that goddamn name. I think that's what it was. It was seven. It was
in that case, don't use the full quote.
Dollars. Okay.
All
right.
Yeah, we're gonna hold off on that one. We want to keep it family friendly.
Family friendly. Then that was that being the quote though. That was it was very, very memorable, and I love that anecdote. Eugene Jarvis curses a lot, so I'm not sure if Lou Nicastro said all the things that he did, but Eugene Jarvis said it, so I ran it in the book.
Yeah, no, you should. If you're you attribute your source very well, so you cover your tracks there, not a problem. And I gotta say that when you told me about when I was reading in your book about the Midway basketball game, that it was a clone of Pong. I had to just go on and look that up for myself and try it out. Sure enough, it's almost like a foosball version of Pong. There you go. It's like a foosball version of Pong where two paddles go together and the other side controls the other two paddles that go together, and they try to get them into the net. Like it's like a Pong, but there's two basketball nets on the side, and that's it. It's really funny. It's hard to explain, but when you see it in action, you immediately understand. Oh, this is just Pong with like a basketball skin thrown on top of it. But that's what's enjoyable is watching the evolution of the sports games genre over time, and your book sort of outlines that as part of leading up to NBA Jam, which I love.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the thing about NBA Jam is that it's very special and very memorable, but it wouldn't have been very special or very memorable if it didn't have some precursors over there. I mean, NBA Jam just doesn't come out of thin air. So yeah, just like you said, that first basketball game was like foosball, just moving up and down, up and down. And Pong knockoffs were all the rage at that point. I mean, everybody had their own Pong knockoff. I'm certain Williams had their own Pong knockoffs, and it was just crazy to me that that it all starts with Midway, and then it all happens again with Midway, and then between those times, of course, there was Arch Rivals, which was another Midway game, and then I'd say that would be like that was Bally Midway. That would have been the late '80s. And then they were eventually, I think it was the last game of the Bally Midway brand, of the original Bally Midway brand before they became Williams Bally Midway. It's a really convoluted history, but there's so many little details.
And Atari gets subsumed into all that too, right? Because Atari, I think, was bought out by Warner Brothers at one point, and then they let them go, and then Midway bought Atari, and then when Midway shut down, now Warner Brothers bought them, so they like re-own Atari through that. Like, it's really crazy when you think about the legal aspects and what's going on with all the companies,
Yeah, no, it's wild. I mean, it's just so strange to think that Williams Bally Midway in the end had so many bits and pieces of all these big companies.
They did, and they touched a lot of different games and a lot of franchises that we all love.
Yeah, I mean, they had at one point, you had underneath the same umbrella, you could feasibly have, Mortal Kombat, NFL Blitz, NBA Showtime, Area 51, Gauntlet Legends, the rights to things like Sinistar, Narc, Defender. I mean, you can go in there, you can throw in Gorf. There's all these different games, and if you use that Midway lineage, then there's a connection to Pac-Man. There's a connection to Galaga. There's all this cool stuff over there. So the Midway name really got around, and that company really did a lot in its time. It's just a bummer that they're no longer around and that it had to end like that.
What else kind of reminds me of that is there's something similar going on with the home console developer, Acclaim. We've got Sculptured Software, Probe, Arena, LGN, Iguana, all these different divisions, all of which I think were purchased by Acclaim at some point and then even renamed to like Acclaim London or Acclaim LA, etc. Can you talk a little bit about that? Did you get a whole lot of insight into that?
I got some insight into that. I didn't focus on it too much because the Midway stuff was really what was most interesting to me. But I definitely, the home console versions are such a huge part of that I want the NBA Jam history that I wanted to say something about that. So from what I understand, Acclaim had a different process than Williams Bally Midway. Williams Bally Midway would go, they'd make their own games. They would come up with the ideas. They'd come up with the software. They would make them in the factory themselves. I mean, if you see a Midway game, that was all a Midway product. I mean, it's not like they're shipping it to it's not like it's being made in a different city or a different country, anything like that. Acclaim is very different. Acclaim was a publisher, and instead what they would do is they would get contracts out. So let's say you want to convert NBA Jam. So if you want to do that, if you're Iguana Studios, you're not just going to get the rights to convert NBA Jam. You're going to be competing with a few other studios. And this reminds me of some stuff what was the name? The gentleman that you talked to last time, David Craddock. The way that he talked about so much of that world of those little developers. I mean, there's a fast turnaround time. Like, you need to have a game back fast because, strike while the iron's hot. Mortal Kombat's very cool, but it could have been a fad. So we need to make sure we get Mortal Kombat out the door as quick as possible. And what they would do is they'd bid for these contracts. So Acclaim would say, I need this game within 6 months or so. And then all these game development studios would put in their offers for that. And then, of course, Acclaim would go through their own process of figuring out who was the right person who's the right company for the job. Could they get it back within time? The crunch was really bad then. I mean, they were really pushing these guys, and that was just the reality of game development, especially at that point, that they needed to to hustle if they were going to get anything out the door. But the upside was if you made Mortal Kombat or if you made NBA Jam and it was successful, then you as the development house, you would stand to make some extra money off that. If not in the form of royalties, then probably some kind of beggar contract for the next gig.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is a lot of pressure. These are huge titles, hugely successful with a large following, and you gotta be able to adapt that, and you gotta do it fast and you gotta do it well. So it makes sense that there'd be big money involved. And of course, as we all know, Acclaim and Midway had this contract, right? They had Acclaim had the right of first refusal. So anytime Midway was going to make an arcade game, when it's time to bring it out to the home systems, Acclaim would get the first opportunity to say, yeah, we want to make this or we don't want to make it. But with NBA Jam, the process was a little different, wasn't it?
Yeah, so with NBA Jam, so Acclaim almost immediately knew that they wanted to do the get NBA Jam. But what's weird about NBA Jam is that different people say different things in terms of who came up with the idea or where it originated. Roger Sharp, who ran licensing over at Midway, he was insistent, he was adamant that this was a Midway idea. Midway came up with it. Midway pitched the league, and then Acclaim decided to adapt it. Then Acclaim said, no, well, we had connections to the NBA. We've got my cat Sora making a cameo over here. They were adamant that we had connections to the NBA. We were going to do it ourselves. NBA Jam was our idea. So it's a really weird thing. I mean, the thing is that when you have a big success like that, everybody wants to take credit, and everybody wants to be involved. And with something like a Mortal Kombat or an NBA Jam, those rights are so important. Now, there was no way that Acclaim could have a stake to Mortal Kombat, because they had made those home games, but they didn't actually create Mortal Kombat itself. I mean, everybody knows that it was all Midway the entire way, and then, of course, those rights are with Midway. But with NBA Jam, you've got the NBA license that Acclaim and Midway are both leveraging from the league.
And not only that, but as you mentioned in your book, there was originally NBA Jam Sessions, and the title for the game almost was NBA Jam Sessions, and someone's like, no, that's too long, you got to trim it. But it's still a play on NBA Jam Sessions, so the NBA got to keep the rights to the title, which led to a lot of interesting confusion later on, didn't it?
Yeah. Oh, wow, that was crazy too. I mean, this is one of those things where I'm certain that there's all these incredible stories of these 90s developers and the stuff that they went through and the disputes they had and like contract negotiations, things like that you have not heard about, like that were just out there. Like, like, for example, in the case of Twisted Metal, there was like, single track, I think, did Twisted Metal 1 and 2, and then Twisted Metal 3 was a different studio, and then there was 99 Studios involved in that, and then there was this and there was that. I'm sure these happen again and again, but in the case of NBA Jam, people remember that very vividly, is that there was a dispute over who would get the rights to the NBA Jam name once all is said and done. So Midway and Acclaim, they had this agreement going back to, I think it was 1990, which they started working together, maybe the very late 80s. And then they end up losing the rights Midway ends up losing the rights to Acclaim through some interesting circumstances that get into the book. And everybody still has strong opinions about that. So that's one of those things. I mean, it was such a successful game that everybody would have the rights to it. Acclaim somehow got the rights, and everybody I've spoken to at Acclaim makes it sound very above board, and I'm inclined to believe them because, you want to give them the benefit of the doubt.
And everybody at Midway seems to disagree.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But
so
that's
then it's
human
like
nature. That's human nature.
Right.
When you win, it was fair, and when you lose, it wasn't.
Exactly. And who's really, what's really going on over here? It's he said, she said, but I try to throw both perspectives in there to let you decide on your own. As much as I love
a very
Midway,
balanced picture. You kind of you take a very neutral tone. You say, look, some people feel this way, some people feel that way. It is what it is. Like I really enjoyed reading it, and I think anybody who reads that can kind of draw their own conclusions. And some people might side with one, and some people might side with the other. But what I was really interested in was the fact that NBA Jam sequels, like, well, who owns the name? Well, the NBA does. So who currently has the rights to do a title? Well, no one does. So random companies could just kind of sign up and sign a deal with the NBA, and they get to do the next NBA Jam. And it may have nothing to do with the original team.
Yeah, that's the wild thing about having something like that, like a license like that, is that you can run into an instance where that NBA Jam license can end up with somebody entirely different from what it started off with. And I know that Mark Turmell and the original group that made that and that the iconic NBA Jam, they were upset that Acclaim took that in such a different direction and had all these different development studios working on it at the end, or at least people who had no relationship to the original NBA Jam. But that's the world of a franchise. You know what I mean? Like I'm thinking about, like Watchmen that's coming out on HBO. I've heard really good things about it. Have you heard anything about it, Watchmen on HBO?
I've seen the trailer for it, and it's on my to-do list. It's something that I do want to get into one day because I've seen the original movie and I've read the original comic.
So it's one of those things where I have to honestly say I'm a big Watchmen fan, but I was kind of concerned about this show being made.
Oh, well, hold on. I do want to ask the chat, who watches The Watchmen? Okay, go ahead.
All right, I do want to see who's watched the show and if they what they have to say about it. There's got to be somebody out there who's got a strong hot take about The Watchmen, in case whether it's good or bad. But yeah, there's one that Alan Moore was the original writer of Watchmen and the co-creator, and he's of course had lots of disputes creatively when it comes to what's happened with Watchmen with DC Comics. And Watchmen was written in 1986, I think it was, and now there's a new Watchmen series in 2019 that I don't think he has any relationship with at all. But I mean that started out as his baby, and then it went someplace else. If you're a big enough hit, there's enough money involved, there's enough interest that I think something like that can happen. And that's what happened with NBA Jam too.
Yeah, definitely. And there's something that you get into in your book. Now, I don't want to give away the whole book because I do want people to go and have an incentive to buy it. Guys, if you use the link below that's in the window here on YouTube, that will help me out since I am an Amazon affiliate, and that would really help me out with my medical bills too. So think about that.
Hell yeah.
But
heck yeah. How about my boy Tabmok? Absolutely.
So go ahead and pick up a copy, or at least wait to the end of the stream, see if you win a free version, and then if not, go ahead and buy one, because you are going to give away a free copy to someone tonight. So let's not forget that.
Absolutely.
But I absolutely love the book. It's definitely worth reading. But one of the interesting things that I do want to get into here is the fact that EA Sports picked up the game. They developed it on the Nintendo Wii, and then by some miracle of miracles, they got Mark Turmell involved. He turns out he was actually at the company in another division, so they flew him down there, and they actually got him to sort of conspire with each other, and they worked together and made it happen. I thought that was a great, happy ending.
I mean, it was a really great moment, especially considering that, he had no relationship to NBA Jam for years. And then, come 2009, 10, 11, back when they're making and releasing NBA Jam by EA Sports, the NBA Jam Bonfire Edition. What a cool little bow on the whole saga, thinking that all those years later he came back to it. Now, he didn't have as much of a hands-on role, but he was really important to Trey Smith, who led the team over at EA. And I talk about a few different things that Turmell said in the book. They had something called the Turmell hit list. In order for this game to be accurate to the spirit of NBA, they needed to do X, Y, and Z that Mark Turmell asked them to do.
I remember that. He had like a list of 3 items. It was really good. He had a specific formula. And of course, he was able to go in depth on, one of those things was to be true to the original. And he was able to go and tell the team things about the original that nobody in the world could have known about him. So they were really lucky to have him.
Yeah.
Now, let me ask you a question.
Yeah. He had he had so much insight, and I mean things like the rubber banding, like who wins what, how the scores go. That's all Mark Turmell. That's all Mark Turmell's genius or evil. And I mean, in terms of when you play NBA Jam, if you're just winning and then all of a sudden you lose, you've got Mark Turmell to blame, for better or worse.
Now, let me ask you this: have you played the Nintendo Wii version of NBA Jam?
I've never had the pleasure to watch lots of videos of people doing this.
Yes.
I've never played it myself.
Me neither, but I did watch some gameplay footage on YouTube, and because I read in your book how Tim Kitzrow was able to record longer lines, and he was able to do much more hours of recording and get more into it. With the arcade, they had to keep it short and sweet. But you know what I found is that the arcade version actually handles Tim Kitzrow's calls, the announcer calls, way, way, way better than the Wii version. And if you pay careful attention when you're watching the gameplay on the Nintendo Wii, Kitzrow will start an announcement, but the gameplay is happening so fast things change, and he cuts out mid-call and switches to another one. That never happens in the arcade port.
No way. I have never noticed that, or I don't think I've ever watched enough Wii footage to notice that. That's so cool. I love it. On this day, the day the book comes out, I'm still learning brand new things about NBA Jam. That's fantastic.
You have to. And look, I learn new things about Mortal Kombat all the time. As much as as in depth as I've been with following Mortal Kombat since its inception, I learned a lot from reading David Craddock's book. And talking to him last time I had him on here. I learned about Mortal Kombat from reading your book. And I do want to ask you a question too, bringing it back to Mortal Kombat, because you did a lot of interviews with some people at EA Sports. Am I right? You talked to some guys at EA?
Yeah, as far as EA Sports goes, I got the one gentleman, Trey Smith, but his accounts were so good that I managed to get bits and pieces of lots of different things. And then, of course, Mark Tramello was also briefly with EA Sports and Tim Kissero, so I got some perspective over there, too.
I'm hoping you can find something out for me. I should have asked you before the stream, but I'll bring it up now. EA Sports did the NBA Jam port for iPhone and Android. Somehow or another, they also did the Ultimate MK3 port for iOS. I have no idea how they managed to snag that license, but they did.
Really?
Yes. EA was the one, not EA Sports, but EA Electronic Arts. They were the one that did Ultimate MK3 for iOS. But it's been pulled. It's no longer in the App Store. Now, NBA Jam is, obviously, but not Ultimate MK3. And I just thought that was such a great game. Like, I actually enjoyed it a lot, more so than I guess most people would. And they use a similar setup where they have, the touch screen simulates a joystick on the left-hand side and the button presses on the right-hand side. You can see that they use the exact same design method, to translate the old arcade game into a cell phone game. They use the same exact type of methodology there. I was wondering if you could figure out, why did Ultimate MK3 get pulled? How did they even make that deal happen in the first place? And will we ever get it back?
Man, that's so cool. No, I haven't heard. You're telling me right now that Electronic Arts had a hand in a Mortal Kombat game? That's too weird to me. You know what I mean? That's just, okay, NBA Jam is one thing, but that's, wow, I had no clue. Man, I might have one contact Electronic Arts. Unfortunately, that EA Sports, they probably wouldn't know anything about it, but it might not hurt for me to ask. So yeah, I think I'm gonna ask that person. I had no clue that happened. The one bad thing about, not a bad thing really, but a different thing about EA Sports versus Midway. So Midway is long gone. And the guys who worked at Midway, they can say whatever they want. You can trash Midway as much as you want. You can say how great they were. You can say whatever you'd like. And chances are, the only people that will really care are going to be people that are either really gung-ho about Midway or hardcore fans, things like that. It's not like they've got to worry about getting hired again at Midway, because there's no Midway to get hired at. And there's no Midway to fire them either. Whereas with EA Sports, and let's say if you go anything towards Warner Brothers, and if you're trying to talk to somebody over there, it's such a difficult process because they're always trying to be careful about what they say, who they talk to, whether it's company approved or not. And that was honestly one of the blessings in disguise of this book, the fact that Midway, God rest its soul, is no longer around. The fact that it is no longer around got me such great inside access to it, and I did not have to go through any official channels.
That's true. It meant that everyone had permission to speak freely. No one had to worry about biting the hand that feeds them. It actually worked out really well.
Absolutely, yeah. You've got that, and then you also have people who just have strong opinions. I think a lot of the Midway guys just really had they were a very spirited bunch, and they're not the kind of people that are like, okay, we're gonna be wishy-washy about our opinions. These guys would routinely tell each other, I think your game, I think that's a stupid idea. It's stupid. They wouldn't really sugarcoat it. But there was a lot of love over there too. There's a camaraderie over there, which was super cool. It really felt like a small, I used to love comic books. I still love comic books, but Image Comics was a small studio. I think 7 guys over there, something like that originally. And, they're very close, and that really brings out the best of them because, there's that fire, and, they're feeding off of each other. And with Midway too, you got something like that happening as well. So the fact that they were very vocal, I think, led to better games in the way that they interacted with each other. They generally all seemed to get along, and it was all love. It was all love. They were hard on each other.
And you could tell it was all rooted in passion for the project. They wanted to make sure that every project they did was the best it could be. If someone else had a bad idea, they would shoot it down and not be afraid to tell them, I don't think that'll work. I think you need to do it this way. They were really certain about themselves. And in fact, when they were wrong and they came back later, they wouldn't be ashamed to admit it. They say, you know what, you were right. I'm glad we did it your way. So good for them. I think that was very important part of their camaraderie and making things happen.
Absolutely. It was very healthy. And I think, one of the best examples of this was Mark Turmel himself. So Mark Turmel is somebody who had big ideas and he had big opinions at the time, but he also thought of himself as the referee of game development of the game development process. And, he's still making games today over at Zynga in California, which are arcade style games in a way. It's a different kind of game, but it's still really rooted to that idea of that, that quick impulse purchase and, eating a quick impulse, getting that satisfaction. As the referee of the game development process. He'll take the good ideas, he'll keep them, and the bad ones, he'll throw them out or he'll modify them. So he had some bad ideas. There was a section that I think I mentioned this briefly in the book where he had this idea for a slam dunk in NBA Jam where, like in Super Mario, let's say you're playing Super Mario 3 and you're playing as, I think it's Tanuki Mario. There's a raccoon Mario, the one that can fly. As he flies, you can, move up and down. You can control that pattern. Well, what Mark Turmel originally wanted was something like that in NBA Jam, where you could control the height of the dunk. You could go way up, then you could go way down and do this and do that. And then Sean Liptak, a programmer over there at Midway, was like, that's a stupid idea. Like, that's not a good idea at all.
Yeah, I'm not going to program that.
Yeah. And then, he's just like, yeah, I'm not going to do it. And then Turmel's like, we'll do it. Like, just show it to me. I think at that point, probably Turmel knew that it wasn't a great idea either. But he's like, I want to see it. And then Sean Liptek throws it in there. And I don't think he made it very good either. He probably, he could have tried harder. But he put it in there. It wasn't very good. And then Turmel's like, yeah, you're right, scrap it, get rid of it. But he wanted to see it anyways, just satisfy that curiosity. And It's so cool that something like that happened. And then Mark Turmel is just like, I don't need everything. I mean, I think the man has an ego, as a lot of really successful people do, but he doesn't have that kind of ego where he will take what he wants over what's best for the product. Ultimately, he wants to have the best game, whether it's him coming up with all the ideas or it's somebody on his team. I mean, he's all about the end vision, which makes him so successful in so many ways too.
Yeah, I do think he was a good listener. I get the sense of that from reading the book for sure. I want to ask you a question about another mobile game, and then we're going to switch off to another topic.
Yeah.
All right. So Ed Boon, not too long ago, let me pull this up. Ed Boon, very long ago, back in 2008, he tweeted about a Marble Madness game that was in development. Now, this reminds me of a quote from your book where you say that some of the Midway programmers that you spoke to just felt that if Midway could have hung on a little bit longer through 2009 instead of filing bankruptcy, they could have been very successful in the mobile games market. Ed Boon tweeted out a picture of Marble Madness as it was in development on the iPhone. And, it was never released. It looked like a lot of fun. He said on December 6, 2008, I'm totally excited by how Marble Madness is turning out on the iPhone. Perfect use of the accelerometer. That looked like a game that I would have absolutely loved to play, and it never came to light.
Yeah. Wow. I had no idea that Boone did that. Man, you are really a font of information. I'm always learning something new from you. That's why it's so fun to come on and interact with you, because I'm always learning something new.
Likewise, I'm always seeing all kinds of cool stuff. You share so many awesome things on Twitter, from pictures, videos, stuff that's never been seen before, things from classic retro magazines. I love all the content you've been putting out as well.
I appreciate it, man. It's always a pleasure to go in, and I always look myself, there's people who like music who are, they're crate diggers. I feel like I'm just like a culture digger. Like, I want to go after, find me, go rifle through the old magazines, find something cool. Like, let me find something in the pages of Game Pro August 1995, something like that.
Yeah, it's all there. It's all there. I do the same thing, man. I'm always hunting down cool sources just like you are.
It's so much fun. But yeah, back to your question about Midway and the mobile game idea. Yeah, multiple people expressed that who worked at Midway, that if they'd hung on long enough, they could have been a player in the market. And I believe that, because, I don't think they would have been successful as, let's say, a Zynga or something like that. Maybe they could have made something that was like super popular, like a Candy Crush or a Farmville or a game of that level of popularity. It would have been hard, but it's possible. They would have had more resources than just a no-name studio. But yeah, the bread and butter of Midway was arcade-style games. And then once that transition happened, when they lost their pinball division in 1999, and then they lost their arcade division in, I think it was 2001, they were kind of without an identity. They were like, okay, are we an action games company? Are we, more of a sports games company in this way? Like, what kind of stuff can we do? And then there was all these projects they sunk millions of dollars into that nothing ever happened with. Somebody just talked to me about This Is Vegas, which I'd never heard of, which I think was a Midway game. I'm not sure whether this one came out or not. I think this one did, but I wasn't even familiar with it. But I'm guessing a lot of money went into it. Fear and Respect, the Snoop Dogg, John Singleton game that never came out. It was on the cover of Game Informer magazine. They just burned away tons of money on that. So if they'd hung on with the talent they had, they could have probably done amazing things. I mean, imagine if Ed Boon was working on mobile games full time, what kind of mobile games he could make. Or if he'd gone through a period where he was making mobile games full time, what he would have made. Or Mark Trammell, or any of those guys. I mean, they could have really made some magic. We'll never know, but just imagining it right now, an Ed Boon mobile game, like his original mobile game, the NetherRealm team going all in on that, or rather the Midway team at that point going all in on that, that would have been really cool.
Yeah, or even figuring out clever ways to adapt some of the classic arcade games. I really think that when I look at the way that Marble Madness was designed, it uses the phone's accelerometer, meaning that you take your phone and you twist it this way and that way, and that will control the direction of the marble. That would have been like a great new mobile twist. It could have been a lot of fun. It's a shame that nobody's doing anything with that, especially these days. Like Warner Brothers probably would have the rights, I'd imagine, to make something like that happen if they wanted to revive that project.
Absolutely. I mean, I think Warner had the rights to a ton of things. So this isn't anything I mentioned within the book, but there was at one point where Mark Trammell was thinking about making Smash TV 2. And he wanted to make Smash TV 2 before Midway went under. And this was like, let's say, I think it was like 2006, 4, 5, 6, 7, sometime around that time frame he was considering it. Now, I haven't ever seen any kind of sketches of it, and John Tobias wasn't at Midway at that point, so it would have been a different game than the classic Smash TV. But that could have been something that happened. So then there's these ideas out there that are great ideas that we'll never really know, like what that Marble Madness would have looked like. What would have Smash TV 2 in 3D from Midway with Mark Trammell's influence look like? But man, I hope Warner Brothers someday revives a few of these projects, at least to put them out there in compilations and things like that, and really like leverage that brand, because man, people still love Smash TV and quote that.
Yeah,
And
especially
especially
if they could bring back some of the original design team. If they could track down Trammell or Tobias and say, hey, we want to bring you on board for this. Speaking of Smash TV, I just came across this the other day. Let me pull it up here. I found the original newspaper article that inspired the title. It was talking about Crash TV, which is like a genre of TV that they were. It was a kind of a nickname that the media gave it. They were talking about game shows, basically like American Gladiators and Rollerball and those types of things. That basically was John Tobias was reading an article about Crash TV, and he thought, hey, that sounds like a cool title. And then instead of Crash TV, let me call it Smash TV.
That's super cool. Yeah, I think I knew that somewhere, but I've never seen the source for that. That's so cool.
Yeah, I was listening to a podcast not too long ago, and I heard him mention that, so I decided, let me track down the original article. That'd be fun.
That's amazing. So this might require like a little bit of Googling, but there's a Roger Ebert review of the movie The Running Man that you should read just for the opening line. And it's like a weird thing to say, but if you go in there and read it, I could maybe even look it up and pull it up right now. It was actually, give me 1 second. I got to find this thing.
Okay.
It's a really cool little detail that I found at some point when I don't know if I was looking up something relating to Smash TV at this point, or I was just interested in reading about the movie The Running Man.
Well, The Running Man sort of inspired some of those Midway titles too, right?
Exactly. The Running Man specifically inspired Smash TV.
Yeah. And
Smash TV came out, I think, 1990. And then check it out. So this is from Roger Ebert, who, by the way, was based out of Chicago, same city Midway was based out of. Opening line of his review of The Running Man. It was published on November 13th, 1987. The Running Man is an arcade game for the big screen, a contest in which the player is Arnold Schwarzenegger and the game keeps throwing big bruisers at him.
Wow, look at that. Right away, Roger Ebert said this movie has a video game-like feel to it. That's amazing.
Come on. It was Roger Ebert. He's a popular critic. It's Chicago.
Yep.
Smash Man. I have to say, somewhere out there, I feel like one of these guys, Mark Turmel, John Tobias, one of these cats, they saw that Roger Ebert review because it is too eerie. I mean, it's Roger Ebert. It's not like a no-name critic. It's Roger Ebert.
No, I give you 2 thumbs up for what you're saying there. Okay, so speaking of Smash TV, I love the fact that in MK Deadly Alliance, they kind of set up that there's like a shared universe between Smash TV and Mortal Kombat. It says in 1991, Johnny Cage was a contestant on the hit game show Celebrity Smash TV. In the final round, he threw his force ball at Mutoid Man and won the game. Johnny Cage donated all his prize money to charity. I absolutely love that.
That's awesome. That's so cool. I remember that. Yeah. You know, I did think that in some ways those the Midway games were a shared universe.
Yeah.
Because at NFL Blitz, maybe 2000, one of them, you could see like ads for Ready to Rumble on the side. You know, of course, you've got Mortal Kombat characters you can play as. There was always that intermingling. You know, you see the same kind of actors appear as talent in the game. Tony Marquez from Mortal Kombat 2, he was in Revolution X. Sal DeVito was, I think, in Cruising USA. In my head, like they're all part of some kind of amazing shared multiverse, like the
I
Midway
don't think it's
multiverse.
just in your head either, because if I looked at the ending to Total Carnage the other day, and it basically says that the 2 guys from Total Carnage end up hanging out with the 2 dudes from Smash TV together. It's crazy.
So that would mean, So that would mean, Total Carnage is in the same universe as Mortal Kombat, which would mean, ergo, Scorpion, voiced by Ed Boon, could have potentially met General Akboob, the leader of Kukistan from Total Carnage, the Saddam Hussein knockoff, who was also voiced by Ed Boon. So you could have had a universe where Ed Boon voiced 2 characters, Scorpion and General Akboob, and they could have interacted. So, man, now I want that game to happen. Like, let's forget about this Super Smash Brothers DLC. Let's make a Midway fighting game happen. Let's get like a guy from NFL Blitz in there. Let's get Arnold Schwarzenegger from Terminator 2 and now from Mortal Kombat 11 in there. Let's get Steven Tyler from Revolution X in there. That would be a pretty dope game.
They really should dip into their old Midway titles at some point. Maybe not for this particular game, but I think at some point they should, because they've already kind of established a shared universe. At least they had built that up. They left the hints. Something else I want to touch on that builds on that. Page 59 in your book. This is the only page I'm going to show everybody from your book.
Of course. No, by all means, yeah.
The part that I highlighted, it says, one of Tobias's initial ideas for Total Carnage involved the world being invaded by ghouls from a dimension called Outworld.
Yes.
Like, let's just let that sink in there. John Tobias had the idea for Outworld invading the Earthrealm way back during the Total Carnage days, like even before Mortal Kombat 1. When I read that, my mind just can't believe it.
That's crazy. It's one of the best details I found, and it was one that I actually found from Mark Turmel. Mark Turmel gave an interview promoting WWF WrestleMania, the arcade game, for Tips and Tricks magazine. I think it was Tips and Tricks November 1995. And right there at the bottom, you can, like, you know, how you have like the main splash page over here where this is all the action is. And then you've got a little interview running around at the bottom of the screen, or rather the bottom of the page. And it was with Mark Turmel and Sal DeVita. And Mark Turmel like goes in there and just kind of casually says, yeah, John Tobias thought of this Outworld idea back in the Total Carnage days. Didn't really do anything with it. And then it became Mortal Kombat. And I was like, stop the presses. You're telling me Outworld is a Total Carnage concept that was then made a Mortal Kombat concept because Mark Turmel said no to that being Total Carnage?
I mean, that's
like,
huge. That's huge.
Yeah, that's massive. And thinking that the initial idea for Total Carnage was involving ghouls and something about this Outworld realm. And then, you know, Mark Turmel being like, look, I don't want to do that game. Let's go with the Saddam Hussein knockoff and this Baby Milk Factory angle and, you know, these macho 80s guys with guns angle. And then John Tobias, he was like, well, I really want to do something in the martial arts realm. I really want to create something with a story. You know, he really wanted to do Outworld. So he didn't get to do Outworld with Total Carnage, but he sure did with Mortal Kombat.
Yeah, no, that's incredible to me. And you also explain behind the scenes, like, their different philosophies, there are different approaches to games. Like, Turmel really wanted to make it so that as soon as you step up to the machine, you're right there in the action. You know what you got to do. And John Tobias was like, "Hey, I want to expand on storylines, and I want to add some depth to it." And Turmel didn't think that was important at all. And John Tobias said it would be super fun to try. And they kind of both went in their own directions, and they both had their own hits doing things their own way. So even though when they conspired together, when they worked together on Total Carnage, it wasn't like the hit that it should have been. I think they each both found their own hits, in their own way afterwards. It was kind of cool how that worked out.
It was very cool. And what's funny about it too is that, from what I understand, is that creatively, they were close, and then they decided to go their separate ways. Of course, Mark Turmel, his artist then becomes Sal DeVita. In the case of John Tobias, his main programmer becomes Ed Boon.
Yeah.
So, but they're all still part of the same people, and everybody's still working together closely. And you'll see Mark Turmel thanked in Mortal Kombat games. You'll see John Tobias and Ed Boon as characters in NBA Jam and things like that, or an NBA Jam Tournament Edition. But yeah, the games that you love, NBA Jam and Mortal Kombat, they would not have happened if Total Carnage hadn't been as much of a debacle as it was.
A total debacle, that's right.
It was a total debacle, which was a phrase that Turmel, everybody told me, it was a couple of people that I talked to that said Turmel used to love this phrase, total debacle. And then if you played WWF WrestleMania, the arcade game, one of the things that Vince McMahon, the commentator, says is it's a total debacle, which is 100% of Turmelism, because I've never heard Vince McMahon say it's a total debacle otherwise in real life.
That's right. No, you can trace it pretty well. MNSZ, who was actually the winner the last time we did a giveaway for a free book, he wants to know if you had a chance to interview Sal DeVita or other developers who participated in some way with Mortal Kombat.
I did. I actually got to speak to a great amount of people who were tied to Mortal Kombat. So I got to speak to John Tobias. I got to speak to Sal DeVita. I got to speak to Carrie Hoskins, of course, Sonya in Mortal Kombat 3, and then she was also in Revolution X, and she was in NBA Jam, of course. That's where she got her start. I got to speak.
I'm going to pull that up for us now. There's an image of her as a cheerleader. Do you want to touch a little bit more on how that happened?
Yeah. So she was working. So this was, let's flash back to 1992, and Playboy had a Chicago office. In fact, I still think they have a Chicago office. I would have to double check it, but it was about 7 miles away from the Williams Bally Midway facility, and one day, Jack Hager, who was an artist over at Midway, great talent, another cult figure that should get a lot more love than he does. I mean, he worked on Carnival, he worked on Terminator 2, he worked on Revolution X, he worked on Sinistar. I mean, he worked on NHL Open Ice. Incredibly talented guy, Jack Hager. Jack Hager was calling on behalf of the NBA Jam team. He called Playboy up, and then some way, he's calling. He says he wants a cheerleader for this basketball game. And somebody at Playboy picks up the phone, and they're like, I don't know what this guy's talking about. What is this? And then they turn over to somebody else that's right near them who's working on looking at some photos, who at that point wasn't just a model, but editing some photos. And that person who answers the phone says, hey, Carrie, this guy's calling about some weird thing. You want to talk to him? You want to do it? And she says, yes. And then Carrie Hoskins picks up the phone, and she has no idea what Jack Hager's talking about. She has no idea anything about Midway or about NBA Jam or anything like that. But she says yes. And then one thing leads to another. And then she becomes one of the two cheerleaders in the game. And then she ends up being, Sonya in Mortal Kombat 3, doing that Mortal Kombat live tour. And she was in Revolution X. She was Val, I think, in War Gods. There might have been another title I'm forgetting somewhere in there. I think she was maybe wearing a bikini and waving a flag and cruising USA, something like that. Yeah, it all started off with just one phone call. So somebody at, it was Jack Hager that called up Playboy, and Carrie Hoskins just happened to be there. And that's where Sonya Blade got her start, or rather Mortal Kombat 3 Sonya Blade got her start. And everybody loved working with her, and she was really into it. At first she was like, she didn't really get the world. She was like, she didn't know anything about video games, but then she understood that these people were artists. I mean, these people are really working hard to make a product the best they can. And then she started to develop, I think, a lot of respect and rapport with them.
Yeah, and now she's pretty active with the MK community, on social media. She goes to those combat events that I love. So I'm really happy to see how that whole thing happened. It's funny that she got her start with NBA Jam. Like you mentioned in your book, she actually becomes a playable character in the sequel, an NBA Jam Tournament Edition. So that was based on a rumor that they turned to reality. And they do that a lot at the Midway. They didn't just do it with NBA Jam, or they did it big time with Mortal Kombat. All kinds of rumors.
Yeah.
The teams would hear, like animalities. Well, sure, they'll make them real. And they did that with NBA Jam too, all the time.
Yeah, that's such a cool idea to me. Is like, I mean, this is something that there's a lot of magic to it. That the idea of like, okay, oh man, is this thing real? Is that thing real? Like, is this character in the game? Are they not in the game? And then you play NBA Jam, and eventually you can play as the cheerleader, which started off as a rumor. For a while it was like, okay, you can play as cheerleaders, but you can't. Maybe you can, maybe you can't. And it wasn't, they weren't ever actually programmed in the original game, but there was a rumor going around that they were. And then lo and behold, in Tournament Edition, you sure can play as them. So there were so many cool details, and that Midway group is special, man. I mean, those guys got along so well. They loved hanging out with each other.
And you could tell they kept their ear close to the ground, so they knew what kind of things people were saying that they could then use as ideas for the games.
Yeah, and that they would go over to arcades and listen in for feedback and watch people closely. Have you ever heard anything about the Mortal Kombat team doing that? Have you ever heard any stories about the Mortal Kombat team responding to arcade feedback?
Yes, I have. I do remember. Actually, I remember reading I think it was in the MK3 collector's book, that Ed Boon and John Tobias would start getting phone calls from kids in their office, and they'd be like, "Hey, how do you make Sub-Zero turn into a polar bear?" They'd be like, "Well, he can't do that." And the kid's like, "Yes, he can. I saw him do it. How do you do it?" They'd be like, "Well, I'm not going to argue with you, but we never made that happen. That's not a thing you can do." So they had to go and do it for the sequel,
That's awesome. I would love to hear more about those stories, because I mean, the thing that I realize about NBA Jam is there are all these amazing stories that you wouldn't know. I mean, there are great things that happen that I wouldn't have found out if I hadn't been able to talk to all these people, if they hadn't given me their time and gone into depth about these things. And I'm certain there's, as much as we know about Mortal Kombat, as many great stories, I'm certain there's, at least a good dozen amazing stories from that time frame involving Mortal Kombat, involving success that nobody ever heard about. Like, I want to hear about that. I want to hear, what their reactions were when they're seeing the game on test, and what people initially liked about Mortal Kombat or didn't like about Mortal Kombat. I'm sure there's some amazing stories out there buried, but yeah, that's so cool to me. Those are the kinds of guys in Midway were like, yeah, we'll watch what the players do. They really cared, and they wanted everybody to get the most bang for their buck. And that meant watching actual player feedback as it happened, which is pretty cool.
Well, some of the stories that I think are so fun to read about are two of the ones that I found in your book, where someone just kind of casually mentions to Termel, maybe you ought to try a basketball game. I think that's kind of funny. Or that's like someone's telling Tim Kitzrow, the announcer, "Hey, can you say boom shakalaka?" He's like, "Say what?" He's like, "No, just try it. Boom shakalaka." I just think that's great. Of course, that's on my shirt. Boom shakalaka. Yeah.
And a fantastic shirt, MrBoomShakalaka.com. Go there, support our boy Tim Kitzrow. Great dude.
Absolutely.
Just the power of those fortuitous moments. Those things that happen. Mark Tamel and Jamie Rivet going over to Burger King and saying we need an extra mode for the game, and then that turns into On Fire. After they're like, okay, what should we do? Like, and Jamie Rivet says, I really like fire graphics. So that then turns into On Fire. Those moments are so special, and that happens. That's just the magic of game development. And I think that's something that's so cool to hear, like, more about how things like that happen, how one thing led to another.
Definitely.
But man, yeah, those Midway guys are special, and there was so much good stuff out there. So
I do hear stories about how the Mortal Kombat team kind of bounced ideas off of each other. I'll tell you one of them. Maybe you've heard this, or maybe you haven't.
Yeah.
But like, Ed Boon will say, "Okay, we want to give Scorpion like a lasso move," and Dan Pesina is Scorpion, and he's like, "I'm not going to do a lasso move. I'm not Wonder Woman." But there is a move in martial arts where they would use like a rope dart, and that was something that they invented to kind of knock people off of their horse. So why don't I do that? And Ed Boon's like, "Okay, fine, close enough. Let's do that." And so he'll throw the spear, and then he'll make like the action of pulling it closer to him. And then as the other guys on the team are watching this, Rich DiVigio will just kind of yell out, "Get over here!" And then Ed Boon will go and record himself saying that, but try to say it with the same tone and inflection that he heard Rich saying it in. So you can kind of see how moves like that are really a team effort.
That's wild. Yeah, that's a great little story. I mean, that's just the magic of that environment, and especially like all. You know what I also really love about Midway is that their games were super popular. The games were on top of the world. Any real management to report to, they could do pretty much whatever they wanted, which is why they ended up with things like Easter eggs in the game that I don't think you'd always get. And I don't think that the Midway management never really pushed back on the violence in Mortal Kombat. Whereas I imagine some other more conservative companies would have been like, okay, I don't really want you to do that. Maybe that isn't a good idea, like to make a game so graphically violent. But, at Midway, you could pretty much do whatever you wanted as long as it was a game that was a hit.
Yeah, they had a pretty laissez-faire attitude. I think that worked out really well. Okay, so let me do this then. I wanted to talk to you about one other thing that was very common among Midway games, and that is red herrings. So I've got this screen up now. I've got a screen of Beer Run for Apple II, programmed by Mark Turmel, where it says Artesians just above. And then I've got another one, Smash TV, where they're talking about the Pleasure Dome. And originally, there was no Pleasure Dome, just like there's no Artesians in Beer Run. He just made stuff up. That's something that we've seen in Mortal Kombat also, like where they'll say, you're going to fight with an undiscovered warrior from Mortal Kombat 1 when you fight Jade or Smoke. And of course, they were never in Mortal Kombat 1.
Right. I mean, that's amazing. Yeah. So this is, just another one of those instances in which you see Mortal Kombat and NBA Jam having such synchronicity.
Yes.
Or like, I mean, like in terms of like both of those, Mark Turmel, Sal DeVita, they loved these jokes in the games. And then Ed Boon and John Tobias did too. But yeah, Mark Turmel would go in and he would add things to his games like he did. Yeah, the Artesians just above in Beer Run. There were no Artesians. It was just a reason for players to keep playing. He's like, you got to get all the keys to unlock the Pleasure Dome in Smash TV. Well, there is no Pleasure Dome in Smash TV. And all these people are playing the game and exhausting every possible option, every possible door, every possible exit, doing whatever they could. There were no keys to get. Then they started getting upset, saying to the arcade operators, this is a bogus game. Why are there no options to actually access these Pleasure Domes or this Pleasure Dome? And then they go and they talk to Midway. The arcade operators are like, people are getting upset with us. What is this? And then Mark Turmel is like, I have to go throw it in. And then George Petro, the programmer from Terminator 2, he was like, you didn't put them in there? Like you didn't put the Pleasure Domes in there?
How could you do such a thing?
Yeah, and then he's like, well, George Petro is a fan of Beer Run also, and he's like, well, next thing you're going to tell me is like, there were no Artesians in Beer Run.
Uh-oh.
And then that news to him was like, no, buddy, there were no Artesians in Beer Run either.
All right, so now I've got a couple questions for you about your personal experience. I saw this thing online. This looked really cool and right up your alley. Somebody made a custom NBA Jam pinball game. And I guess this is like software that you can actually download and install and you can play it on your computer, but it's totally NBA Jam and it's totally pinball. Have you ever heard of anything like this in your life?
Oh my gosh, I've never seen this before. This is a work of art. I mean, you could do a little bit of work to make the field a little bit better. I have never seen this. Look at this. Tabmok, you really are just a font of knowledge. No, I'd never seen it before. That's a great idea. There was an NBA pinball game that George Gomez worked on. It was it called? No, it was NBA Fast Break. I think it was 95, not 95, it was probably 96, 97. And some of the Midway guys had an influence on that. Tim Kisser was the voice for that. But there was never an official NBA Jam pinball machine or any kind of NBA Jam pinball game. So it's so cool that something like that exists out there. I'm going to have to check that out.
Yeah, there is a fan-made one. I really want you to play that. I've actually gotten into a lot of different games thanks to you. I played Beer Run and I played Sneakers for the Apple II.
I love it.
I played a Ninja Turtles fan game based on the Beats of Rage engine that you made us aware of. Even this other one, this is like a Bomberman, I think Atomic Bomberman for like Windows 95. I managed to get that up and running. I got into a lot of crazy games that you shared over your social media, so I just wanted you to know that.
I love that. Atomic Bomberman has a special place in my heart. Wow, you played Atomic Bomberman because of my post? Man, this NBA Jam book is cool and all, and this day's been great, but hearing that you played Atomic Bomberman because of a post I made, I feel like that's like it. This is it. I'm peaking right here. This is the best moment. It's been a pretty great day, but man, That's amazing that you played Atomic Bomberman because of that post. I love it. I love that game.
There's one more thing that I think could really put you at the peak of your career. We kind of hinted at this earlier, that Boom Shakalaka, that wasn't just someone spouting random nonsense at the top of their head. That came from somewhere. That came from a song by Sly and the Family Stone, I believe. So
yes, you are correct.
Okay, so obviously Tim Kitzrow is Mr. Boom Shakalaka, but maybe Sly Stone would feel differently. Have you ever had a chance to interview him and get his thoughts on how his song inspired NBA Jam and how it made Boom Shakalaka into a cultural phenomenon?
That's a great point. I've never really explored the history of that band. I know that
he's old.
I know
now.
that they're iconic.
He's old now, but he's still around.
Yeah.
You have a chance to talk to him and get his thoughts on it. And I think you're the only one who can do it.
If I ever get the chance, I would absolutely do that.
Okay.
There's got to be a way I can make it out. Yeah, no, that's amazing. Yeah, I never thought to go down that path. Yeah, it was such a great little moment, thinking that, like, yeah, somebody's just listening to a song. They like the way they say, boom laka laka laka, boom laka laka. And then, somebody says boom shakalaka, and now you've got boom shakalaka on your shirt in 2019 because somebody was listening to it at a desk in 1992 at the right time.
Yeah,
so
it's definitely impacted the pop culture for sure.
Yeah, it's wild.
All right, now before we started up the stream, you said that you had some kind of a word association game planned for me. I guess I don't... let me look and see if there's any more questions I have that I wanted to talk to you about. Here's one last
question. Fire away.
There is one last thing. In your book, you mentioned that they used some kind of compression scheme on Tim Kitzrow's audio, and it was kind of based on, I guess, something that goes back to the 1940s so that people could communicate over walkie-talkies. And it really does downgrade the quality a lot. Not so much that the game is unenjoyable, but there is a noticeable drop in the quality. Do you think there are high-quality recordings that Tim made back for the original NBA Jam? Do you think those exist anywhere?
I don't think they do. I could probably check on that, but I'm almost certain they don't. What's funny is that a lot of the stuff, you feel like it's history, it's important, it should be preserved, it should be on a drive somewhere. Somebody should have saved these files or on a floppy disk, something like that. Like those should be out there. But what I probably think that they did was they probably used that CVSD, that compression scheme that they had, to give those files that kind of, he's on fire, he's shooting up, like that kind of effect on it. I think they just wrote over whatever the original files were and just trashed them. If those files existed, I would love to hear them. You know what? Now that I think about it, maybe there's a chance they do. Let me tell you why. So, have you heard of this NBA Jam XXX? I won't say any of the words, but are you familiar with NBA Jam XXX?
Well, I am, thanks to your book. You did mention it in there.
I did. So, he's dropping F-bombs, he's doing this, he's doing that. And in that NBA Jam XXX version, it was something that was based, at least from what Tim Kitzrow and John Hay, who worked on the Mortal Kombat team, worked on the NBA Jam team doing the music, and was also rated in Mortal Kombat. I'm still working on that for you. They indicated that, this was something that was pretty, I apologize. I think I just totally lost track of what I was talking about. I was talking about Tim Kitzrow,
NBA
John
Jam
Hay.
XXX and some secret recordings.
Yeah, NBA Jam XX. I got off on the John Hay tangent. NBA Jam XX. It's been a long day. NBA Jam XXX. They were joking around in the studio. It was late at night. They got all their lines done for NBA Jam. So then they were like, let's just joke around. And then they started throwing around the F-bombs. They throw around this, throw around that. And then lo and behold, that's got saved in a zip drive somewhere. And then it gets pushed on over to get saved, and then it ends up in Acclaim's hands, and then somebody from Acclaim went and then held on to those files, and years later it somehow ended up with this NBA Jam XXX mod. And what Tim Kitzrow and John Hay said, it was based on those original sessions they did, and those are high quality recordings.
Right. So and in your book, Tim Kitzrow denied it at first and said, "Oh, that must just be a really good imitator, but that wasn't me." Okay, fine, it was me.
He did, yeah.
I love
he
that.
Did, and yeah, he did that, and you could still go and look up those articles at Kotaku and things like that, where he's like, "Nope, that isn't me. That's just some YouTube pranks." Those YouTube pranksters are at it again. And then it turns out it was him, and he was just really concerned that if the NBA found out, it would be less of him. But at this point, I think it's kind of not nostalgic isn't the right word, sentimental isn't the right word, but it's kind of just charming.
He's safe. He's in the safe zone. He can talk about that stuff now. Yeah,
exactly. It's something like, oh, how quaint. Right. I mean, obviously, you're not going to hear F-bombs being dropped at NBA games or in NBA games nowadays, and video games or on the court from the announcers, but it's still something very quaint, like you're worried about something from the 90s coming back to bite you. But I think he's in the safe zone. So I double check with them. I'm like, are you sure I can run the story in my book? Like, I just want to make sure that you're comfortable with this. I mean, as a journalist, I'll probably end up doing what I want to do just for the sake of reporting the best story I can. But I do want to give him that, I do want to ask him if I can. And then he's like, well, if John Hay talks about it, then go for it. And John Hay did talk about it. So I went for it, and we talk about NBA Jam Triple X in there.
Good for you, man. No, you know what? That's just one of many, many great stories that I read about in your book. Were there any stories that were just kind of off the record? Like you were told, hey, this happened, but you can't tell anybody?
Definitely. There definitely were. And what sucks about that is like, I see what you're doing. Let me just hint at one. What's the best way to hint at this? The relationship between Midway and Acclaim was pretty complicated. And Acclaim didn't entirely always know what to make of Midway and vice versa. And then this is something that I do mention briefly in the book, but blew my mind, is that Acclaim and Midway were briefly talking about merging. And then the talks were just, pushed aside. But there was almost a time in the early 90s or, you could have had Acclaim and Midway together. And who knows what would happen there. Now, that would be a different book. Like, I imagine the egos over there and the money involved would have really just, I don't think that would have lasted. I do not think that it would have been a good thing for Midway and Acclaim to merge. But, yeah, I allude to the relationship between Midway and Acclaim with the whole NBA Jam name thing and the whole licensing. But they didn't always know what to make of each other. And I don't think the Midway guys were always super fond of the Acclaim guys. The Acclaim guys thought everything was hunky-dory. I mean, they were working with them for the games and whatnot. But I think the Midway guys were being professional but didn't always appreciate what Acclaim did. Because for whatever Midway's games in that era, there was always a certain level of quality. I mean, these guys put their back into it. I mean, Absolutely. They were really trying to make the best games. And, yeah, even Mortal Kombat 2. I mean, I can't imagine they had very long to make that. Came out just a year after.
No, yeah. I read a little bit more about that from David's book, Arcade Perfect, about how, there's two different ways that they can go about it. They can just try and look at the source code and do it all from beginning to end. And then what happens then is you don't really have a game until like the last minute. And then all of a sudden you have basically a completed game. Or you can try and do it in bits and pieces, or what they call milestones. So they can, by 3 months, they want to have all the graphics, and by another 3 months, they want to have all the sound, and then by the last 3 months, they'll program it all together, something like that. There's basically two different approaches, and for Mortal Kombat 1 and Mortal Kombat 2, they took opposite approaches to the game, and the one they went with for Mortal Kombat 2 really worked a lot better.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you think about that. I mean, think about that short time frame between those games. Like, not even just the arcade versions, but yeah, those home ports. I mean, these guys have such a fast turnaround time. That said, though, Midway would knock it out of the park. I mean, Mortal Kombat 2 is still beloved, even though they did not have a lot of time to work on that. It wasn't like they can just take as long as they want. Midway, you had to do like 2 or 3 games in once at a time. Like, if you weren't turning out a game, there wasn't a game going out the door, then that was losing money for the company. So they had a short time to do it, but they still killed it. And then Acclaim, on the other hand, some of Acclaim's games, let's just say they weren't so hot.
Well, that's what they had LJN for. They kind of put all their lower quality games over to the LJN brand.
Oh, LJN, Lord, yeah. Well, what did AVGN describe them as?
Laughing, joking, numbnuts.
That's what it was. There you go. LJN, yeah. God bless them. Yeah, briefly under the Acclaim banner. I wonder who owns the rights to LJN. I want to give the rights to LJN. I feel like there's got to be some kind of money in like the ironic market. I mean, those Asylum movies, those parodies of big movies, those take off. Sharknado. I feel like LJN games would be something some guy would buy.
There's also The Room by Tommy Wiseau.
Exactly, yeah. So the culture of irony means that I feel like if I was like, hey guys, it's 2019, LJN's back, and this time they've got the license to Gosh, what could LJN really destroy?
Sharknado.
Oh man,
That would be great to just
LJN
adapt those kind of schlocky movies into schlocky games.
schlocky games. I feel like some people would be. I think most people would be disgusted, but I think some people would be like, you know what? There's that sadistic part of me. I really want to try it out. Let's see, what is, what's it all about? So I think LJN would have a shot. I would really be curious to see somebody revive that brand. Get some T-shirts out there, do something with it. There's got to be some money in the LJN name at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. All right, well, I guess that is all the questions that we have for you. I want to move on now to the word association game you told me about before the stream started.
Yes. So this is something that I'm going to be doing on the fly right over here. Tabmok does not know a thing about this, but I have a box over here of classic arcade flyers. They're all Midway ones. But the idea is that I want to get your first association with a certain image that I show you, or when I show the game itself. Now, some of these are going to be ones that, of course, you're going to know, or some ones that you have a soft spot for, and there's some ones that I don't think I've ever really heard you talk about before. So I just want to bust them out and I'll see, what is the first thing that you think of. So let's go with an obvious one over here. So what's your first impression when you see this?
Oh, the combat codes. My first impression is they made this combat code system for MK3, and they were promoting the heck out of it to the arcade operators. They put the codes in movies. They put the codes in the live tour, the animated video. They made sure everybody knew what these codes were and how to use them.
Did you memorize the codes back in the day, or did you one of those things where you read them off of a guide each time you used them?
The one that I memorized was half power, which was 033 on whichever side you do it on. I remember that because I liked to put myself at half power and then win anyway. That was really humiliating for the other guy.
Ooh, you can't do them dirty like that, Tabmok.
Oh, you're hurting.
Wow. Oh, vicious.
It is.
Vicious.
It is. When you put yourself at half power and you still win, the other person knows they've been had.
Yeah, oh my gosh. It was like the time when we played a Galloping Ghost and you guys just mopped the floor with me. I'm terrible at Mortal Kombat 2. And you and Fatal Kid were just killing me. If you guys would give me half power on that, at least I would have got a couple hits then. Something would have happened over there. But man,
yeah, we would have worked even harder to fight against you. You wouldn't have gotten a single hit.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Vicious. All right. Let's see. So this is another classic over here. Listen.
No one had the guts until now. Narc.
So what's your first impression of Narc, or your first memories of Narc?
The thing that sticks with me the most about Narc is a story that I heard from Josh Sway, who is making the Insert Coin documentary, about a gang member who went into the Midway building, super angry, saying that they had an image of his gang's sign, and it was reversed. Because what happened was the Midway team, they went around Chicago, with a video camera, digitizing the buildings. One of the buildings happened to have a graffiti tag from his gang, only they flipped it. They mirrored all the images horizontally. And when he saw that his gang's logo had been flipped backwards, he was pissed, and I think he was about to start shooting up the place. He made some threats. They issued out a patch to Narc, removing that logo from the next version.
That is a brilliant story. I've never heard that before. Wow.
We get
Are there versions
crazy
out
stories
there?
between you and me. We have a lot of crazy stories.
Yeah. Man, Insert Coin Doc. I cannot wait for that. I am just antsy to get my hands on that and to see what he's done over there. Josh is it's such an exciting project, so it's just a matter of time before Insert Coin's out too, and we can see Midway from a more visual side, and get to hear some more stories. So
yeah, and I should have him on my stream soon as well. So that's another thing to look forward to.
Absolutely, yeah. Shout out to him. Yeah, so many talented people making cool things like this. David Craddock with Arcade Perfect. I haven't read it yet, but I really need to read that. So guys, if you haven't seen it already, check out that stream from I think it was last week with David. And that was a really great stream. I remember sitting in on that. I didn't comment anything on the chat, but I followed along as you did.
I didn't know you were in here with us. Cool. That's awesome.
I don't have to tell you every time. I want to hang out. I just want to see what you guys got to say. I was thinking about throwing in a question or something like that, but I was just like, you know what? I just want to let this one play out, and I really love hearing David's perspective. Great dude. All right, here's one. This is on the curveball side because of course your forte is Mortal Kombat, but do you have any memories or anything that you associate with NBA Showtime, NBA, and NBC? These late '90s Midway sports games. Do you have any kind of affection for them or any knowledge of them?
Not a whole lot. I did read about that one in your book as well. That was a huge moment where Midway was sort of legitimized. I remember that arcades didn't used to be looked at in high regard. They were kind of regarded as seedy, and a lot of illegal activities happened there. But by the time that NBC was willing to put their name on an arcade game, they were basically considered family friendly at that point.
Yeah. And I think I posted this before, but there was a court that somebody made for NBA. It would have been for NBA Showtime, Mortal Kombat themed court that they pitched to the NBA, and of course the NBA said, "Heck no, you're not putting that in.
Nope,
no way." There's going to be a Mortal Kombat court in an NBA game.
Wait, you just reminded me of something. In your book, you mentioned that NBA Jam was based on DePaul University's basketball court. I've got a picture of it up on the stream right here. This is the real-life basketball court that NBA Jam was based on. Basically, the Midway design team went over to DePaul University with the video camera, filmed it from multiple angles, and then went back and redrew it and put it in the game. Did you ever have a chance to visit this?
I did not know, but that was a great little story, too. I mean, the idea that, taking cameras over there, trying to see what's going on, like trying to map out the court for use in a video game was a very novel thing back then. And this was another cool story that came up while working on the book, is that Tony Goski, who is, of course, he's still with Mortal Kombat. He was an artist on NBA Jam. He did the heads, and then he transitioned from that to doing the backgrounds for Mortal Kombat 2. And he's still with NetherRealm and the Mortal Kombat team until this day. But he went to DePaul University, and he had this camera, and he was up in the stands, and they were running practices. Now, of course, Tony Goski's over there so that he can get the footage to make the court in the game. And there's a coach who's like, he sees Tony Goski up there with his camera, and he goes, hey, who's that guy? Like, stop recording. Who's recording? Why are you recording? He thought that Tony Goski was there taking footage of it to steal his plays, and that he was somebody from a rival team or some from other school. And he was he was capturing footage of DePaul to take it back. And then this coach was really upset. And then Tony Goski to be like, look, no, it's just like, we got permission. We're doing it for this basketball game. And then everything was hunky-dory after that. But, when he first went there to take the scan of the court or take film of the court, which he then took and made a one big piece overall from that composite. That coach was initially really upset. So many cool details too that come up along the way. I mean, that's like a little story that you'd never hear otherwise if you weren't really doing a deep dive on NBA Jam and being like, okay, how did the court come about? Where'd that all come from?
Something similar happened when they were filming, I believe it was Judge Dredd, where, the Midway team, they walked around with a video camera. They were filming, I guess, a jewelry store. And then before you know it, the security guards come out and be like, hey, what do you think you're doing? You're casing the joint so you can come back and rob us later? It's like, whoa, don't get the wrong idea. This is just for a video game.
Yeah, no. That's so great. It must have been so weird for people out there who weren't familiar with the world of video games, where, you've got the Midway guys going over there taking pictures of Subway in Chicago for the Subway in Mortal Kombat 3. And I'm sure all these different little cityscapes. It must have been pretty weird. And even Willie Morris Jr., who was the main model for NBA Jam, he's the guy who does the iconic dunks. Mark Trammell went up to him on a court when he was playing street ball one day, and this guy's, it wasn't street ball that day. It was a pickup game, and William Morris Jr. is this guy who's playing this pickup game, and Mark Trammell's like, I like the way you play. I want to put you in a video game. And William Morris Jr. is like, okay, sure, whatever. Thinking what is this garbage this guy's talking about? This guy's crazy. What's he actually talking about? And then lo and behold, he actually did have a video game, and that video game ended up becoming NBA Jam, and Air Morris Jr. is, Willie Air Morris Jr. is still somebody who is played as because of that game. So really wild times. I mean, video games are such a big part of pop culture now. I mean, they were part of pop culture back then, but it was a little bit more removed.
It
Now
was confined because now you've got generations of people who grew up on video games, but back then you didn't really have that. So it wasn't.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was more of a counterculture thing.
Absolutely. And there was such a stigma, I think, that with playing games, I thought it was so cool that you have things like NBA players going and playing NBA Jam and really talking about how much they love the game. Not that I think there would be a stigma about playing a sports game, but I don't think that, you can really hear.
Uh-oh. I think we lost you. Okay. I was having two of me show up. That was weird. It was like a mirror match all of a sudden. Give me a moment, guys, while I try and see if... Hey, are you back?
Yeah, can you see me again?
No. I'm seeing two of me. I'm seeing double.
No?
Yeah, it's like a mirror match.
Tabmok versus Combat with me. Round 1. Yeah.
Let me turn this off until I can get it straightened out. You might have to do something for your camera to turn it on.
All right, let's see. Let me do this. Yeah, this is being... Oh, here we go. Let's see. Oh, there we go. I'm back in business. Can you see me again?
Yep, you're here. That was funny.
Sorry.
That was funny.
Sorry
Everybody got
that.
two of me for a second.
Yeah.
All right, so what were you saying?
Who were we talking about when we left off before we were so rudely interrupted?
Well, I remember you were saying video games were not really looked at that well, and it was amazing seeing NBA Jam players actually go in and play an arcade game.
Yeah. Shaq was the big one.
Yes.
That would go and he would go and play in the arcade. Glenn Rice would wait in line, and he would wait in line in an arcade in Miami to play NBA Jam. That's so cool to me. I mean, you're a guy, you do this professionally. People know you. I mean, you are like, people play NBA Jam to play as you. You're going to play NBA Jam to play as other people or to play as yourself in NBA Jam. It's just so weird to me. I mean, yeah, you wouldn't really see instances of people back then. Like, you don't hear a lot about gamers from that time in terms of celebrities. You'll find bits and pieces in magazines, but it's definitely totally different. Like over now, like if you like, so-and-so celebrity plays a video game, it's like, that's cool. I'm sure a lot of people do. But back then, I'm sure they did, but it wasn't really documented in that way.
So with NBA Jam, it was different. The players were really excited to be able to have a copy of themselves in the game. Like, they were legit thrilled about it. So much so that a lot of them owned arcade cabinets just so that they could play whenever they wanted to. I mean, it was really something else.
That's so cool to me, thinking that was the thing, that they were going to go... spend their time to wait in the arcade and play it. And then at some point, Glenn Rice says, you know what, I'm tired of waiting in line. I'm just going to go in and buy my own machine. And then his kids monopolize the first machine. So he says, I'm going to buy a second one. That's the life I want to live, where it's like, too many people are playing my first 4-player cabinet. I'm just going to buy another 4-player cabinet. That's what I'm going to do. That's the dream right there.
Exactly. All right. So the last one you showed me was NBA on NBC.
Yeah, NBA Showtime. So I've got two more.
Okay.
And all right, so let's see. So how about this one's another sports game, but it's a little bit different because it's got a connection to something you love deeply. So do you have any memories or any knowledge of Impact or...
I know that Ed Boon programmed it. I remember reading that in an interview with Video Games Magazine back in 1995.
Yeah.
Impact Football.
From what I understand, I believe Ed Boon was actually the model for the game, right?
That may be.
Yeah. I've heard that he's the guy who was actually digitized within the game, which is crazy to think about. Like, all these little players that are running around on the field, those are all Ed Boon in various poses.
Oh, I didn't know that. I never heard that before. That's awesome.
Yeah. So that's something that I want. It's one of those stories that, like, I want to hear more about, like, as in hear more Ed talk about it, to be like, okay, what exactly was your role? How much were you doing? Was there anybody else involved? But what's funny is that when NFL Blitz came out a few years later, so Super High Impact would have been probably like 1990 or so. Mm-hmm. And then NFL Blitz comes out in 1997, and then lo and behold, you have another person associated with Mortal Kombat who's a football player, and that's Sal DeVita, who ends up doing all the moves and the motion capture for NFL Blitz back when they transitioned away from the digitization towards the 3D technology, where they were, using the bulbs on the body and things like that. And it was Sal DeVita doing it. But yeah, Sal DeVita's precursor was Ed Boon. So I just love this world of Midway lore and how all these little stories are interconnected.
Yeah, definitely. Another thing I remember about High Impact is that on the main screen it says that it's a Williams game. Does your flyer for it say Williams or Midway?
This one, I'm almost certain this one actually says, if I go over here, let's look at it together. It says Midway.
Oh, look at that. Well, that is super High Impact. So the original High Impact was Williams.
That must have been right when they made the transition. It says 1991, copyright 1991. So that was right when they were making the transition. With I think Little Carnage's Midway. That's 91 or 92. That's right when it's fresh. So yeah, all right. Last one for you, a familiar one. Now, of course, you know everything about this, but the specific image itself, I want to see if you have any impressions of. And that is the classic flyer.
Yes.
For Mortal Kombat 2. What comes to mind when you see this group?
Well, okay, so that was actually used on the cover of a magazine, even though it started out as an arcade flyer. So my first experience with this cover, with this image, was as a magazine cover. But it was stuff like this. It was this type of imagery that really made me want to go to a thing like the CES, the Consumer Electronics Show, or the or the E3, like when they did the E3 demonstration with MK3. Like, seeing that stuff actually happen made me be like, all right, I want to be up there in the thick of it. I want to be where these guys are. I want to see this stuff for real. And in fact, that image was taken in Las Vegas. I did some reading on this. There's actually a video footage of Dan Pesina doing a martial arts demonstration against Anthony Marquez as, Johnny Cage versus Kung Lao. So there's video footage of the two of them fighting from that exact day that photo had been taken.
Wow, I remember that. I love that video, and man, that video is somewhere. I've got in my whole bank of things that I want to share on Twitter sometime. That video is one of them. The same day, I had no idea. We're learning so many things together.
Exactly.
Yeah. The other thing I want to just ask you about real quick to end off on this is, when it comes to this, why was the Mortal Kombat logo backwards? Like, why would they do that at times? I mean, there were shirts printed up where the Mortal Kombat logo was backwards. As a kid, I thought they could go either direction. Of course, you're very used to seeing the dragon facing to the right, but then you've got this flyer where the dragon is facing to the left and things like that, where it's like, okay, why is it backwards? So what was the reason that it was backwards?
I have no idea how it got flipped. In MK1, the dragon was facing left on the character select screen, and then in MK2, they flipped it to the right. That flyer right there was like really the last time that you see it to the left. It was right around MK2 that everything started turning to the right, and that flyer is like the last little remnant before they had changed it. They were still on the left. So I don't know how. I don't know if that was a conscious decision or if that just sort of evolved over time or what. And I think in the original cabinets, it faced left. I guess the left one faced right, and then the right one faced left, so they had two dragons kind of facing each other, and that was a very cool aesthetic before they changed it and made it just kind of facing right all the time.
Yeah. No, it's just something I've always wondered about, because I think there's a picture out there of Boo and Tobias right around the time of Mortal Kombat 2 wearing Mortal Kombat shirts with the dragon facing the wrong way. And it's very weird. I mean, it's one of those things where like you have to be like a real big Mortal Kombat fan to notice it. But even then, it just looks off.
If you're a huge Mortal Kombat fan and you know all about Mortal Kombat in and out, you kind of pay attention to these details and they mean something to you. Just like the switch from Roman numerals to Arabic numerals. Like, why did they use the Roman numeral 2 for part 2, and then they started to hype up part 3 using Roman numerals, but then when it actually came out, they used the regular number 3. So it's like they kind of make these decisions here and there, and who knows what the rhyme or reason is to it. I wanted to read a comment from Interloco. He says that in the MK9 code, conditions to get toasty refer to it. Instead of an uppercut, they call it a super high impact.
That's so cool. I did not know that. That's awesome. Yeah. I love that these guys are still, I mean, that's one of the great things to me about NetherRealm Studios is like, honestly, regardless of whatever you think, positive or negative, about how Mortal Kombat games have gone, there's something so great about the fact that you still have so many people from the OG games from back in the day who are still part of the team. We were talking about Watchmen earlier, how HBO's Watchmen is a totally different product from Alan Moore's Watchmen. In this case, we've got Mortal Kombat 9, Mortal Kombat 10, Mortal Kombat 11. Like, these games, they're still connected to those classic Midway games from back when Mortal Kombat was a brand new thing, back when they were just getting an idea of it. It's so cool to hear that. I'd never heard that before, but that's awesome. That sounds like such a classic Midway thing to do, to make something super high impact.
Yeah, and there's not too many titles that you can say that about these days. You know, a lot of games that come out with sequels, they're really far removed from the original development teams. So I just wanted to give a shout out to you, Reyan. I know you're a true fan through and through. Back in the day, you ran a Mortal Kombat site called Mortal Kombat NetherRealm. I don't have a picture of that, unfortunately, but I do have a picture of your site for The Grid. And you actually owned the domain, thegridgame.com.
So this is where it gets a little tricky.
Oh wait,
so
that's the official site, isn't it?
Yeah. So check this out. So but my very first ever writing gig. God, this is what I love about this. This is very full circle for me. My first ever writing gig was back in the late '90s. So it was probably like 11 or 12, and it was for a Mortal Kombat website, and it was called the Mortal Kombat NetherRealm. And we were lucky enough to be in touch with the Midway team via email back then. And then John Vogel, shout out to him. What a great dude. He fielded, I don't know how many questions for me about The Grid, which was the Mortal Kombat team's new game between Mortal Kombat 4 and Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance. And, back when there was no information about Mortal Kombat 5, you were like, okay, what's The Grid? Let me know everything about it. So I did this whole FAQ with him. And keep in mind, if you know anything about my story, is I spent my childhood in Pakistan. So I did a whole interview with him, like multiple question interview, detailed interview about The Grid. And I never played The Grid once as a kid when I was writing this FAQ, as much as I wanted to, because they didn't have that over there. I mean, they had a Mortal Kombat cabinet over at the Pizza Hut, but they were definitely not getting the new games at that point, especially not a game like that, where it had a pretty limited run as is. But Mortal Kombat NetherRealm was such a cool project, and I was lucky enough to be able to write for the site. And then I wrote this whole FAQ, and thegridgame.com, the official Grid website, linked to us from their links page. And that was a huge, huge honor. And thankfully, web.archive.org has captured that for all the generations to come. So my great-grandchildren can know that I did the FAQ, or rather that Mortal Kombat NetherRealm did the FAQ for The Grid. Excuse me. Shout out to John Vogel. What a good dude for making that happen back in the day, and then for putting us on the links page. So yeah, that's a little bit of proof that my legacy with this, or my love for Mortal Kombat and Midway, goes way back when all these games were new. Back when the arcades were still around and they were still a thing. So it's super cool that that's preserved. It's really gratifying, man, to have this moment to think that, in fact, I interacted with you probably way back in the day. Like, you and I probably had a conversation on MIRC.
Yep.
If not directly, then in a group, probably around 2000, 2001 or so.
For sure.
Yeah. And then lo and behold, 18 years later, wow, when you put it in that context, wow. 18 years later, you and I are talking. It's just wild. So it's so cool. And I mean, you're one of the OGs, man. When I saw your name, when I first started getting back into, the Mortal Kombat community online, and when I was starting to write this book, and when I was really getting into that, it was really heartening to see your name. And I was like, tabmok99. I remember him from back then. It's so cool that he's still around. And the same thing goes for dudes like, you'll see Dark Bishop's name around, or see Scott Howell's name around. It just is really, it's like, oh, it's the guys from back in the day. I love it.
Dark Bishop actually kicked all of our butts the last time we went to Chicago to play The Grid.
Oh, man.
Yeah,
I love it.
He totally rules at that game.
That's awesome. That's such a fun game.
Absolutely. Well, all right. I think it's about time that we do the giveaway. So what I want everybody to do is type in the chat, what is your favorite Midway title, not including Mortal Kombat. So any title by Midway other than the Mortal Kombat series that we all know and love. Go ahead and just type it in the chat, and I will go ahead and add your name to the list. And when we have all the entries, we'll go ahead and select a winner.
Awesome. I'm going to go over here and pull up the chat on my cell phone, because when I switched over to that other screen, that's when that thing cut out.
Okay.
So I'm going to see on here what people have to say. All right. Let's see. Oh, yeah. We've got some love for USA over here.
Yeah, you're going to be happy with Interloco. He picked NBA Jam.
Shout out to Interloco. Man, this is that super high impact fact was great. Man, I love this stuff. Man, shout out to Stephen Tang though for picking Cruisin' USA. Not enough people talk about Cruisin' USA and how that was a pretty big hit for Midway at that time. With those interlinked cabinets, that was still a really new concept. I mean, now like a driving game going to the arcade with interlinked cabinets, it's like
It's expected.
So what? Yeah, but back then it was very fresh, and I think maybe it was the first or one of the first. Daytona USA was right around that time, but there was it was so fresh. So yeah.
Okay,
Man.
so just so we're clear, the winner will get a free ebook. You don't have to wait. That will basically come as a digital download. You'll get it right then and there, so you don't have to wait for it to come in the mail. Let's see. MNSZ says he's not going to participate just because he won last time, so he's being a good sport. But he says, do you guys remember War Gods? And I remember we were talking about War Gods earlier in the stream because Kerry Hoskins played Valhalla on that game.
Yeah, man, War Gods. I was so excited for War Gods. I remember the first time I got it. This was actually still back when I was living in Pakistan, and I visited my aunt who was going to college over in England. And I remember I bought War Gods, the PC version, at this game store over in somewhere. I'm not sure if it was London, wherever it was in England that I was at the time. I was like, man, War Gods, this is great. This game looks so good. And that opening, it's Midway presents War Gods. It's like, oh, this is going to be so good. Oh, it's going to be like Mortal Kombat in 3D. This is before Mortal Kombat was in 3D. It's like, it's going to be so good. And then you play it, and it's like, yeah, I mean, at least for me, I was like, man, some of these character designs are pretty cool, but it was also like they didn't really like go in for like a really interesting story or a really interesting play mechanic. It was very early 3D. Like I mean, at the time I was down for it because it was Midway and I wanted to give it a shot. And I thought that main guy with the horns or whatever, like that main guy who was on the box, somebody's going to say like, not main guy, it was so-and-so boss. I forget the boss's name. I thought he was pretty cool, but that game itself, I was like, it was so early 3D.
Yeah, when 3D was in its infancy, it wasn't really quite ready for prime time. It took them a while to sort of work out all the bugs. I think War Gods actually had a 3D button. They tried to make it, Midway was very well known. They specialized in digitization. So when they brought out 3D, they first tried to kind of combine digitization with 3D, and they just don't work too well together. They weren't compatible, so I think they never went back that way again.
Yeah. Have you heard the stories about the rivalry between the Midway team, or rather the Mortal Kombat team and the War Gods team?
No, I'd never heard about that. Tell us.
No. Yeah, so I only know a little bit about it, but so of course Mortal Kombat 4 came after War Gods, and I think it was a point of contention. Like the Midway guys on the Mortal Kombat team did not appreciate the fact that War Gods was beating them to the punch. So all I know is like little bits and pieces of a story, nothing that I can really be like, okay, this is what happened. But yeah, from what I understand, they were upset, and War Gods caused some friction in the Midway office on the personal side between these guys. This is something I never knew about until many years later. But yeah, apparently it was War Gods was not liked by the Mortal Kombat team because they thought that they were encroaching on their territory.
Wow. Maybe if you ever write War Gods the book, you can find out more about that for us.
Oh, heck yeah. War Gods the book. Yeah, coming 2025. Get ready. I spent 4 years on on NBA Jam. I'm about to spend even longer telling you the full detailed story of War Gods, everything you need to know about the greatest 3D fighter of all time. Actually, you know what? I'm sorry. Let me take that back. The best Midway game of all time, right? I mean, War Gods, it's way up there. Forget this Mortal Kombat stuff. Why isn't your name War Gods backward?
You know what? Maybe if you were to do like a grid book, a War Gods book, just concentrate on all these Midway titles, you could actually just do a lot of interviews at the same time, and you could just write 3 or 4 different books at once and then just kind of space them out. It's a lot of work in the beginning, and then after that, you're sitting on easy street.
There you go. I have so many great stories that are still hidden away. I did 68 interviews for this book, so I've spent years talking about Midway, learning about these guys, what they did, that this book scratches the surface in some ways. I mean, this book is it's a full story. There's a beginning, a middle, and end. There's characters, there's things that happen. But with an interview format, I've got some really interesting little anecdotes that I know spot to fit in. So hopefully I'll be able to find a home for that someday and do something more with it. But there's so many great little stories out there. I mean, just this War Gods thing, that's just something because we're talking about War Gods right now, we scratched the surface.
You know, at the end of Arcade Perfect, David Craddock took a bunch of interviews and says, look, there's not really a place for some of the stuff that we talked about in the book, but these interviews were so good, I'm just going to present these raw interview transcripts right here for you to read through. Would you ever consider putting all your interviews somewhere like that, all 68 of them?
Definitely. I wouldn't do all 68 because all 68 wouldn't be worth reading. No offense to all those people that give me their time, but it's more like some stuff was just like, okay, is this, more like fact checking background and things where it's like the answers weren't super interesting necessarily. Like the answers are like, okay, you gave me what I needed to know in terms of some facts, but wouldn't be particularly readable. But I could definitely see me doing something with, let's say, 20 of those interviews, like the best 20 interviews and running with it. I don't know. I'll leave the door open. You never know. My dream, I'm going to say it right now, is someday, the NBA Jam does so well, I can do NBA Jam Tournament Edition, and I can throw in I actually had some more material. There's, in fact, a whole chapter that had to get cut that maybe will see the light of day someday. And I have all these little bits and pieces of stories, too, so my dream is to do NBA Jam Tournament Edition, like, the director's cut, where I go in and flesh out stuff and maybe throw in some photographs and some of those cool documents and do something with that. You never know. Never say never.
Yes, and if nothing else, I would still love to see the bonus content maybe released online, maybe through the publisher.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, if you're looking for bonus content, especially on the Mark Trammell side, I'm working with Boss Fight on something pretty cool. The idea being that Boss Fight does little ebooks as samplers to give people an idea of the different titles in their series. So for this, I'm actually not running an excerpt from NBA Jam, but doing something all original, or rather something completely different from the book, and that is going to be a cumulative interview with Mark Trammell. So it'll be like the best of Mark Trammell's interviews with me. And I did 10 of them. So I've got some good stuff in there, and I've got some fun quotes and some fun little stories. So I'm working on that too for Boss Fight, and don't have an ETA on that right now, but that's coming down the pike.
Oh, dude, that's awesome. Can't wait. Please keep us posted when that happens. I guess now it's time to go ahead and switch to the giveaway. So as you can see, I've got some names up here. If anyone wants to add your name to the list, this is your last chance. Go ahead and type in a random Midway title now, or forever hold your peace. But right now we've got Interloco with NBA Jam. We've got Steven Tang with Cruisin' USA. We've got Red Fan Rod with NBA Jam Tournament Edition. And we've got Big J21 also with Cruisin' USA. So these seem like the big two popular titles here among the group.
That's awesome.
All right.
I'll say that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that Cruisin' USA and NBA Jam are getting the love. We're in a Mortal Kombat stream and nobody said Mortal Kombat. I love it.
That was against the rules.
Oh, I'm sorry. I missed that. Okay. All right. Because I would have been like, I feel like everybody would have gone for like Mortal Kombat 2 first. But
of course. Like, no. Of course they
Cruisin'
would.
USA, Mortal Kombat 2, Mortal Kombat 1. Actually, yeah, let's just push Cruisin' USA even higher. Cruisin' World even above that. I love it.
All right, well, let's go ahead and draw a winner here. I'm going to type in the magic formula. Whoops. If anybody knows anything about Excel, you'll know that I'm typing a formula that will pick a winner at random. Hey, it's Red Fan Rod.
Oh yeah, Red Fan Rod. All right. Can they privately message you, Tabmok?
Yes.
All right. So yeah, Red Fan Rod, congratulations. Privately message Tabmok your email address, and then he'll give that to me, and then I will be in touch with you tonight. You'll be receiving a special gift from me in the form of the NBA Jam book. Thank you guys so much for participating in this. That's so exciting. That's so cool. Yeah, I'm so happy to get another copy out there, and I hope you guys dig it.
Yes, well, thank you for being here. Red Fan Rod, I don't know what the best way for you to communicate with me is. If you have Twitter, just go to twitter.com/tabmok99. That's me. I've got the same username on Instagram also, if that works. So either one of those will be fine. And Reyan, thank you so much for being here. It was a pleasure talking to you. This NBA Jam book, I mean it. I never really cared for the game all that much. It was never my jam. but I had a great time reading the book. I loved reading the stories behind, the Midway team, and even when you publish the Mortal Kombat parts of it, especially, those are some of my favorite parts, and that's the reason why I think everybody in this channel, if you don't have the book already, make sure you buy it. Please use the address below. That will help me out a lot. I thank you all in the audience for being here. This was a great live stream. Can't wait to do the next one. Reyan, do you have any parting words?
Yeah, I have one quick thing to say to Big J21 over here. He asked whether I got to talk to Ed Boon or not. I didn't get to talk to Ed Boon, but I did talk to John Tobias, and John Tobias is an important character in the book. Thank you so much for having me on. It's been a blast. I always love catching up with you and talking to you about Mortal Kombat and Midway and whatnot. The response to the book has been overwhelmingly positive, and it really means the world to me. Spent 4 years on it, and it totally feels like it was worth it. I mean, even if it would just been a fraction of it or really no response at all, the project itself was still so fulfilling and so much fun. So I'm truly grateful for the opportunity to share these stories with you guys. And I hope, as Ed Boon and as John Tobias are people that you guys love, for the Midway fans out there, I hope that like Mark Trammell means something to you too, and Tim Kissero and, Sal DeVita as an artist, not just as a Mortal Kombat actor, Eugene Jarvis, George Petro, Jack Hager, these guys are legends. And I hope that you guys dig the book, and then that takes it to another level. And Tabmok, actually one last thing before we leave too.
Oh, yeah.
We are giving away a couple of flyers. So if you go follow me at NBA Jam Book right now, I've still got a flyer up. If you have Twitter, go on there and retweet it right now. In a little bit, I'm probably going to call it quits on that contest and then end up picking a winner. And Mortal Kombat Online also has a contest that you guys are running right now for Mortal Kombat 1 flyer. And then we're going to be picking a contest for that too. So go to at MK_online and at NBA Jam Book on Twitter. Find the tweet that mentions the flyer, retweet it, and we'll probably, pick a winner sometime tonight, and then I'll get you guys your flyers before you know it.
Oh, yeah. Interloco definitely wants a flyer. If you want a Mortal Kombat 1 flyer, you do have a chance to win one. You've got to visit mortalkombatonline.com and leave a comment on the thread about the flyer. So if you just post a response there, you'll automatically be entered into that. And, of course, there is a link to the tweet right there in that post. So click on the tweet and retweet it, and you'll have a second chance to win it. So you really got to do both if you want to maximize your chances.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with us for so long. Man, shout out to all you guys. It means a lot to me, and I always love talking about Midway. I mean, long live Midway. It's gone, but it's not gone. And you never know. Maybe Warner Brothers will resurrect that and throw it on some T-shirts or something. I'd buy a Midway T-shirt even if Midway wasn't around.
Well, I'm really glad that Warner Brothers has not totally forgotten, their Midway arcade roots. In fact, in the game Lego Dimensions, there's this whole thing where if you buy the Midway arcade machine and you can set it down on the piece, you can actually play through a bunch of Midway arcade games. And in fact, you're required to play through the Midway arcade and in order to progress through the larger game. All those classics are now mini games. So they never forget their roots. We shouldn't either. Guys, go out and buy NBA Jam, the book. Show Reyan some love here. Thank you very much for the live stream. It's been awesome. Reyan, you've been awesome. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you, guys.